So a little while back, we started talking about the idea of forming this business alliance because everything that we do is complementary, right? Easy Company, Sprint Law, Pop, and Thriday. So we've got Alex from Easy Companies. Please tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, thanks. So, I started Easy Companies in 2013 just to get it off the ground. I saw the opportunity to basically make the easiest company registration platform out there. I feel like we've done that. I'd say we've done that. Reviews would show. But yeah, I came from a tech background and I built the platform myself, basically. I just love getting into code and building things, building products.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Super cool. Alex Solo, Sprint Law.
I can be called Solo for the purposes of this discussion. I'm the founder of Sprint Law. We're an online legal provider for small businesses. We've been around since early 2017. My background was sort of working before as a corporate lawyer in a very traditional law firm, but seeing this big opportunity to sort of combine technology with law and design something that's much better for smaller businesses than using the more traditional law path, both in terms of efficiency, quality, and ultimately cost. So we've got a bit over 5,000 clients. We've been sort of expanding internationally and sort of have big visions for the business. So it's been an exciting journey over the last few years for sure.
Awesome. We've got Lee from Pop.
Yeah, so my name's Lee. I'm a tax accountant by trade. So Pop is a progressive online accounting business. So we started in 2019. We have helped a few thousand clients so far. And the reason Pop started was because we saw the gap between traditional accounting firm and what the client needs these days. So we wanted to minimize all the red tape and we wanted to make accounting and tax advice more accessible to clients, especially the younger generation or people who prefer a seamless, communication with your accountants. So that's where we're coming in and hopefully fill the gap.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Awesome. I'm Justin from Thriday. Thriday is a financial management platform for businesses. The old way of doing things was super inefficient, where banking held the data and then that had to feed into an accounting platform, and you tacked on an invoice platform and an expense management platform, and then gave all of your data at the end of the year to your accountant. What we've done is combine all of that into one just to make the cash flow management process as efficient as it possibly can be for small businesses. And, partnering with businesses like yourselves makes it easy for everybody. So,
yeah, great.
Yeah. There's a shift at the moment for businesses, and there's two forces coming together, right? There's a positive on one side, and then there's a negative. On the negative side, we've got inflation, and that is creating chaos, right? And then on the positive side, we've got these massive technological leaps with AI, etc. But what is happening in the middle of those two things is the need for businesses to become more efficient, right? Basically, if you're not the most efficient business, you're going to lose the business. Your customers are expecting you to be more efficient. They want more for less, and you've basically got to deliver. So off the back of that, our businesses came together because of that efficiency, really. At the end of the day, and we'll get into it, Easy Companies is a quick and efficient way of streamlining the actual setup of your business. Sprint Law is a quick and efficient way of getting all the legals and everything you need done within your business. And Pop is a super efficient way of the accounting and the tax side of the business. And Thriday, as a financial management platform, just makes it very easy for a business to understand how healthy their business is and manage their cash flow. So that's kind of how it all came together. If we start at the top, let's start with Easy Companies and talk about, what it takes to start a business. Alex.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting getting underway and starting Easy Companies back in the day. I started the business in 2013. It was a very different world back then. And I didn't see much opportunity to kind of get investment or to, make it big back then. I just bootstrapped the whole business and got it underway myself with, the knowledge I had. But when I went out there to start my own business back then, I found there was a lot of red tape by the government. It was going to be using either clunky systems, filling out ASIC forms, or at the time there were a few competitors in the market, but they were very outdated and very clunky. So you could say that Easy Companies it didn't really create a whole new industry. We just got into an existing industry and just did it better.
Yeah.
I just saw opportunity for amazing customer service and amazing products and a better user experience. So we just reinvented the wheel essentially.
Yeah.
and
Scratch your own itch.
Yeah. and made it better. I just saw that opportunity back then when I was trying to merge a few different companies I had, and I had to start my own company, how complicated it was. And that's where Easy Companies was birthed, really.
Yeah.
And then I went, wow, this is what I should be doing. Instead of all these other companies, I should just build Easy Companies.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Went out and did it.
Pick and shovel play.
Yeah. And now 10 years later, we've helped 150,000 businesses, which, it sounds like a lot because it is.
Yeah.
When you sit there and think, wow, that's a lot of people going out, starting their dream, putting it out there, putting their ideas out there and actually getting underway. That's a lot of businesses that, have taken that leap to kind of start their dream.
That's awesome. And I love that reinventing the wheel. We say that internally at Thriday as well. We want to reinvent the wheel, not necessarily the spokes, right?
Yeah.
Let's just make it all work together seamlessly and easily. I also know from starting my own business back in the day how much of a punish it was to navigate and understand what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, and where to even look right. I was a parachute rigger coming out of the army. I just had no idea.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is still confusing. I don't think even the work that we've done in this space, I don't think it's still that easy. There's complicated structures. There's complicated, we're looking at what do I choose a sole trader? Do I choose a partnership?
On and on we go.
Absolutely.
But we're all out there to make that easier. I mean, that's our core. But I'm sure you can say that, the other businesses in this room are also trying to do that as well, just make life easier for small businesses.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're starting a business, you're confronted with, what structure do I even choose?
Yep.
Before that, it's even what name,
Yeah.
You would think, well, choosing a structure is the hard part, but there's just so many businesses out there now that any name you think of, it's probably already taken. And if it isn't, there could be a trademark internationally or other components. So, choosing a name is really the first step, that one that's available, and the domain names out there.
Yeah.
Because even if you choose a company name, maybe someone's already taken the .com.au or the .com.
Yeah.
And then even if they had, then you've got to check socials and Facebook and, see that you're going to fit into all these spaces, right? But yeah, once you got the name, then it's down to really choosing the structure.
Yeah, right. And is the name something that you guys do? Navigating that sort of section?
We don't help with choosing a name because I think it can be one of the hardest parts. And I think it really comes from inspiration.
Yeah.
If you can't think of the name on the spot, you just got to let it sit and it will come. Just think of the core components of the business you want to build, and then one day it just comes to you. That's how Easy Companies came.
Yeah.
I was just like, we want to make setting up a company easy, and we do companies, so we just merged it. Before we had a brand that we have now, it was a bit tacky. It was like Easy Companies, and people thought it was EZY and whatnot. But now it's formulated into what it is today.
Yeah.
But it just came to me. I think at times you just got to wait for that inspiration with the name.
Yeah, cool.
And we've tried using AI to generate names, but it's that's what I was saying to Alex before. This is just sometimes it's not as creative as you think it is. AI, it's not there yet fully.
Yeah.
To kind of build that, it just joins words together.
It helps with ideas. I find it's not a guarantee
No.
of output. I'm helping my 14-year-old daughter start a business actually, and we used AI the other day to help come up with a name. And
Yes.
what do we come up with? Mural Maven, because she's going to be selling wall decals designs.
Right.
Yeah. How'd you come up with your name, Alex?
Well, yeah, similar. I would like to say it was a beautiful moment of inspiration, but my co-founder Tomo gave me a list of about 80 different names that captured, I think, the essence of what we were trying to do, which very kind of aligned with sort of what you were talking about, thinking about, we got a traditional industry, super outdated, but we want to do something a little bit different and progressive. Think about efficiency, think about technology. And a lot of the concepts for what are we going to brand this thing? What are we going to call this thing? Were about thinking about being progressive, but also introducing the concept of technology and combining it with law. Sprint's a concept. Obviously, it means running fast, but it also means something in sort of agile project management, which is a concept that came out of the technology industry about when you're building things, you listen to your customers, you think about iteration, you try things, you fail fast, and you improve them. And I think, in the industry that we were in, which is law, it's very hierarchical, very traditional, and very much sort of, it is done this one way sort of thing. And so for us, the name and why it kind of stood out to me in that big list was certainly, it captures all that stuff. We're going to be different. We're going to be progressive, and we're going to do this law thing a little bit differently.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And also moving quickly, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It gives the right message. I think also, with easy companies, right? Like you look at the brand and you just know what it is and what it does. And same with Sprint Law. We're clearly doing law and we're clearly doing it differently, and it's going to be pretty fast. So it helps give that message, I think. And I think there's many different ways to do a brand, but that's one way to do it.
Yeah, awesome. Lee, I don't know if you're pretty new to Pop, so I don't know if you know the background of how Pop was actually created as a business name, but if you do, let us know.
Yeah, so from what I know, so back in 2015, the founders they were still working at another accounting firm at that time, and it was a Melbourne Cup event, and Pop was actually the name of the horse that won the race. And they put money on it, and I think the rate was like 150.
Yeah, I made a lot of money that day on that same horse.
It's like called Prince of
Prince of Penzance. Yeah,
Prince of Penzance. So that is the name. And we started using it. It's when Sid and Pat, met and started, became friends and started, building business ideas, and that's how it all started. So it's a name that helped them, cement that, memory and, looking to grow just like the horse.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, Thrido was a bit of a different story. We were originally called Thrive, and a company came into the market and bought Census in Australia, which is a massive company, right? And they had much deeper pockets than we did from a marketing perspective. So we decided to pivot slightly and change from Thrive to Thriday. And Thriday is actually a portmanteau, means thrive every day. But the way I like to think of it is it gives you a day back in the week. Thursday becomes your Friday because we save you so much time. Cool. So let's start from the top.
Yeah.
Starting your business. These are the things you need to think about. The name we talked about, entity type. So you've got sole traders, partnerships, companies, trusts. Where do we start?
Yeah, well, I think that's the second decision. So you've chosen the name. I think now you've got to move into how do I want to structure, and that really fits into the three categories there. It's really sole trader, partnership, and company. The trust, you can say, is an addition, a technical addition. From our perspective, you've got to look at what are you planning to do with the business, because you don't want to set yourself up in a position where you set up a company, now you have these extra obligations from a financial perspective. You've got to renew a company. It's around $300 a year. Then you got to do a separate tax return. So you've got to look at is this just a side hustle that you kind of just getting off the ground? You'll see how it will go. Then potentially a sole trader is going to fit you best. Is this you're really going to put some investment into the company, and you're really going to put some time in, and you're even thinking about investment, then a company might be the right structure. You can't really make a mistake because you can always restructure. The mistakes happen that if you start as, say, a sole trader and the business just completely takes off and you haven't restructured into a company, now you're in a difficult position with tax and capital gains and things like that. So you do kind of want to get the structure from day one, but if you catch it early, you can restructure without having, major tax implications. The partnership is a kind of odd one because it kind of merges like what a sole trader is, but then you're working together with other partners. But they're quite complicated because if you want to change partners, you have to set up a whole new ABN. So I would say generally company, it's either sole trader or company. We do get people setting up partnerships, but you kind of want to fit into one bucket because if you set up a company, when you're intending to set up a partnership, then you can always just change partners down the track by selling off the shares or, adding in new directors. So it is a bit more fluid than being locked in. But yeah, sole trader, I would just say if you're earning, it's more of like a subcontracting kind of business, or you're just not looking to earn a lot of money. It's just a kind of side hustle. You can always just start with a sole trader plus a business name.
Yep.
If you've got the business name locked in, no one can take that company name. So as long as you own the business name, when you come to restructure into a company, you will own that company name. So, as long as you add on the business name and you don't just set up with an APN, then, that pathway is kind of set out. So yeah, as I mentioned previously, the only thing to think about with the company is the ongoing obligations. So you've got the annual review fee every year. You'd be adding on another tax return, and then you just got the overall added compliance weight of a company. But if, what most people would see and come to us, they're ready to kind of start, they're ready to go all in. And in that case, our platform can just kind of help people through that whole process, set up the company, set up the ABN, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And is there consideration to the difference between trading name and business name when it comes to maybe moving from a sole trader to a company?
Not particularly. I mean, if you're a sole trader and you set up a business name, that's your trading name. They're kind of interchangeable. Trading names is more like the legacy term for these things.
Yeah.
But if you own the business name as a sole trader and now you want to set up a company, you can bring that into the company so easily. So that will just become your company name.
Got it.
So that's the kind of migration path usually is like a lot of people start out as sole trader and then move into company. People hitting our platform, we obviously see a lot more companies because it's our brand and it's what we're targeting. But we do offer sole trader partnerships and it is still common. I would just say it's more like hobby driven or subcontractor or tradies or things like that and more into the ABN.
Got it.
But the other component of a company is you get, or the benefit, you can talk more about that, is around liability.
Yeah.
And why a company protects you from an asset perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we as you're kind of talking about, get a lot of questions. Should I be a sole trader? Is it time to convert to a company? And then it's a big decision for people who are either starting out as a side hustle or their business in the early stages. Am I ready to spend the money, get on the sort of train of having the compliance burden of renewal fees and management of a company? We're lawyers, so we're risk averse. It's kind of part of our job. So we're often saying, there's really big advantages from a liability perspective to sort of running a company. You have limited liability, which means with a few exceptions, generally the people running the company, the directors or the shareholders who are the owners of the company, aren't necessarily liable for issues that occur within the company. Customers of the company can generally sue the company, but they can't come after the shareholders or their house,
things like that,
home, their car, and all this sort of stuff. So,
which is a sole trader easily.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to your point earlier, it's a trade-off, right? Of the complexity with setting up a company, the simplicity of running as a sole trader.
Yeah.
One thing I often say is, the longer that you do this, just the law of numbers, customer 1 and 2, things might not be likely to go wrong. Once you've serviced 50, 100 customers, or your business has been running for longer and longer, chances are you'll have that, 1 in 100 event where there's a liability issue and you're going to wish you were a company. So, and then another, I suppose, consideration is like, what industry are you in and what kind of work do you do? Again, even if you're early stage, but you're doing something really risky, you might want to think about the company even earlier. Yeah.
I mean, if the $2,000 ongoing, roughly I'm estimating that ongoing obligation for a company, $2,000 a year, it seems like a lot, then maybe a sole trader is the way to go. But realistically, if it doesn't, then it's probably better just to take the leap and start with a company from day one.
Yeah.
Because then it's there. Because if you don't catch it quick enough, the problem is when you restructure from a sole trader to a company, you create a capital gains event, which can then be quite tricky. You're paying tax on the valuation of the business as it stands, which you don't really want to be doing at that stage of the business, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I think in terms of restructuring, if you set up a good structure initially, that will save you a lot of cost in the long run. There are times where you can restructure without paying a significant amount of tax. But there could be times where it could be a bit late. Depends on the size of the business and what stage you're in, and your personal circumstances as well, because of different tax concession applicable in different cases. So I think it's important to speak to your advisors on a regular basis to see where you're at and get advice at the right time to make the right decision, make informed decision.
Give us an example, like a business, say a sole trader starts out and they predict that they're going to make like 120, 130 grand a year just to sort of get by. Is that like but then all of a sudden they're making like 200 grand a year and they're thinking, what should I do? Like when is the point where if someone did start out as a sole trader, they should consider moving to a company, or if they've got different goals and a different view of where their business is going to end up reasonably quickly, what consideration should they have as to starting a company or a sole trader at that point?
Yeah, okay, that's a very good question. So for me if someone come and ask me about this issue, the first thing we would look at is what sort of income are you making in this business. So I'll be looking at whether you're having a personal service income or a business income. The reason is the way you distribute money and pay tax, these two incomes are different. So if you're making 200K a year and it's your personal services income, then essentially all profit would end up in your personal name. So having a company may not necessarily help you in terms of tax. But as you guys already mentioned, if you're in an industry where there's a lot of risk, then maybe it's the right time to move on to a different structure where it add another layer of asset protection against your personal asset. So that is something that you might want to look into. For the other one, the business income, right? So business income give you more flexibility in terms of tax and profit distribution. So if you're looking at $200,000 in profit each year, you're obviously paying a lot more tax in your personal name. So if that's the case, it is a good idea to move on a different structure, such as company or trust or a combination of whatever works for you. So that's what I would advise my client.
I think that's the challenge. If you start out as a sole trader, if you're seeing income take off, you should be really restructuring, because if you're earning 200K as a sole trader, you're paying tax on that every year. It's not that you're going to avoid tax, but in a company, you get to kind of move it around more. You can pay the 30% company tax and let it sit there and reinvest it into the business. As a sole trader, you're just paying tax on it. That's it.
Got it.
You don't get that opportunity to move it around or let it sit there as equity.
That makes sense. So either if you predict you're going to be doing really well from the beginning, start as a company, and if you start doing really well, change as soon as possible.
Yeah. Or if you see yourself taking investment or anything like that, investors aren't going to touch the sole trader. They're going to want to see a company constitution and all that kind of stuff. So you really have to sit down and think, how serious is this? And understand just the ongoing obligations of having a company. It's around $2,000 a year, roughly. That's an estimate of the yearly ongoing kind of cycle of getting a tax return and whatnot. And that's the kind of make or break. Is that a lot for me? If it is, or maybe the sole trader is the right structure for now.
Because it becomes not a lot if you
if it's not a lot, then you see the business kind of taking off, then that's it. But you can restructure. You're not locked in.
The risk thing was interesting. What, I guess, one for you, Solo, what would you see as a riskier business and then a less risky business?
I mean, look, think about what are the kind of circumstances where a customer or supplier or someone might sue you because they've suffered loss. If you're doing things that involve a risk of personal injury, maybe you're running an event, or maybe you're doing, physical activities. Maybe you're taking people to places that they could fall off a cliff. These things have a risk of personal injury, and with personal injury comes liability. And so that's kind of one area. Are you providing risky kinds of services or advice? Are you providing financial advice or health advice or those sorts of things?
Something that might cause loss to somebody else.
That might cause loss to somebody else. Exactly. Are you dealing with expensive equipment or things that you might damage of your customers' materials? I don't know. Are you cleaning expensive sports cars for people and you might, knock off one of their windshields? We've seen scenarios like that. So I think you're just thinking about, if something went wrong in what I do, and someone could be very upset about it and suffer loss. I want to make sure that if the worst of the worst happens, as much as precautions and protections I put in place, I've still got this layer of protection of a company. I think that's kind of what you might think about. Yeah.
So you can see it's still weighing up the kind of ongoing obligation versus is it worth it? That's you have to kind of consider really.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There's this like the risk matrix people have probably heard of, where you think about a way of thinking about risks is sort of what's the likelihood and impact of a particular risk, and it's in any business there's tons of risks, and if you want to exist, you can't spend your life doing risk management and preventing every single kind of risk from occurring, because then you'll never run a business and you'll probably run out of money kind of trying to protect yourself. So you're weighing up, how likely is this to happen? If it did happen, how severe would it be? And the company is certainly a tool, depending on your situation, which may make more or less sense at a particular time.
Got it.
The only other thing I'd add on to that is the trust component, which really sits as a shareholder of the company. So you're basically setting up a family trust that then owns shares in the company. It is a bit more an advanced structure. We just added on because it is quite a common question these days from clients. They've obviously got advice from a tax agent or tax advisor saying, you set up a trust. The trust just gives you an extra layer of flexibility down the track. It basically means that the trust owns shares in the company, and then you can kind of control the income coming out of the company a bit more and where to distribute that income. But it also protects you, again, as another layer between the company and yourself, and allows you to kind of move income around and assets as well, right? Quite easily.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there's certainly tax components around the trust setup. From a legal perspective, as you say, one of the advantages is, particularly for businesses that have multiple shareholders, for example. So, when you have a company, you can think of it as kind of a shield against issues with customers. But there are owners of the company, the shareholders, and between each other, there's if you're all holding your shares individually, not necessarily that same layer of protection. So particularly in startup companies that might take funding, or businesses where there are multiple shareholders, there could be risk between each other, and often having a trust structure, a certain type of trust structure where you've got a company involved, you can add that extra layer of protection from not only customers sort of suing you, but potentially other shareholders suing you as well. So that's certainly one reason. But I think there's also sort of
the flexibility down the track, right? Say you sell the business, you can leave that sitting in the trust or in a bucket company or something. You get more flexibility, right? If
That's
you're
right.
owning the shares yourself, you sell the business, you pay capital gains from day one.
That's right. Yeah, a good business structure would allow you to access, concession from from the tax perspective. For example, the small business CGT concession. If you have a good structure, you potentially can minimize tax altogether. So the key is, as you guys say, it's very important to have company or trust set up in a way that assists you should that happen in the future.
Yeah, but I mean, trusts are complicated structures. I wouldn't advise people to be setting it up on their own. You definitely want to see a lawyer and accountant to get that initial advice. And even though we offer trust, it's really designed for people who have got the advice and know what they need to kind of structure.
Yeah,
they're not you kind of DIY products, because you don't want to find out 5 years down the track that the trust isn't even valid.
Yeah,
that's not. These aren't good experiences. So you want to have the right advice.
Even little things like naming trusts and having companies.
Who's the trustee?
Who's the trustee?
Important.
Exactly.
Company
And is
trustee.
it a corporate trustee, which is an extra layer, which is good.
Yeah.
But you can see that kind of adds up now. Now you've got a tax return for the company, tax return for the trust. You've got another annual fee for the corporate trustee.
Yeah.
But these are if they're done right, they're really good structures. You just have a lot more ongoings.
Yeah.
And a lot more letters from ASIC and the ATO.
More calls for your accountant.
We all want them.
And more work for accountants and lawyers, yeah. But that is the kind of pinnacle structure if it's there.
Yeah, agreed.
You got the big decision, GST.
GST. Should you register for GST or not? Depends a lot on what we just spoke about in terms of the structure. And it also depends on where you are in terms of where you're starting your business. Once you start earning more than 75K, you have to register for GST.
You've got that aspect from the law, like it dictates if you earn over 75K, you have to register. So that's the first thing.
Correct. Yeah.
Or if you're taxi driver or Uber or things like that, there are a few other categories. I haven't covered them all. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, some of them are forced to register for GST.
But then apart from that, it really becomes a decision that you make on your on your own, whether you're going to register for it or not, and weighing up the pros and cons of that, right?
Yeah. So I guess the question is it easier to start out, like just register for GST right from the get-go, assuming that you're going to earn 75K, or wait until you hit that point? That's what's easier.
Well, the thing is, if you register from day one, and you're only earning a lot of income, there's not a lot of expenses, then you're paying more GST than you would have if you weren't registered for it, right? Because you're basically paying GST. But if you're earning a lot more in expenses from day one, and they're GST, applicable expenses, then you can claim that back. So it can work out more beneficial. You'd agree, right?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
100%. Maybe one thing I would add is, in terms of commerciality, right? So if you're not registered for GST, your customer would perceive you as a small business and may not, treat you with the same respect.
And you're not allowed to charge GST.
That's right.
If you're not registered for GST.
That's right.
It definitely looks weird not having GST on an invoice.
Yeah.
You'd kind of question that. You're like, what's going on
Yeah,
here?
yeah, that's right. So you want to deal with larger, clients or,
Yeah.
a different, entity. They might be looking at it and say, oh, are these guys, legit? Are they reliable? Why are they not registered for GST? They'd be thinking about the size of the business and, what could happen in the future.
Well,
So-
you instantly know if someone's not registered for GST, they're earning under 75K.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a dead
right.
giveaway because by law you have to be, or they're
Yeah.
either breaking the law. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. You don't. Yeah.
So it's a giveaway. You're right. It's a kind of signal that we're serious about business.
Yes.
And it's not a threshold either, is it? Like if you as soon as you hit that 75K mark, you've got to pay the GST on the 75K that you've made. Right? That's right? So it's not
Backdated.
once you hit the 75K mark, then you register for GST, you only pay GST on anything you earn over the 75K. How does that work? Is it a threshold?
So
or is it?
so as long as you're hitting that threshold, you have to register GST from that point onward. You start paying GST, and you will be able to claim GST credit from that point onward.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah, it is a difficult decision. I mean, we see it with all our businesses coming through. Should I? Shouldn't I? Our approach is usually just like, do you see yourself earning 75K? Then that's the legal decision. But I do agree with the other points just around like, the perspective of the business, how it's seen, how other suppliers see you. Some companies, banks would be looking at weird potentially if they're giving you a loan and you're not, hitting that mark. These are all the kind of giveaway signals. The second thing is if you're earning, as we mentioned, if you've got a lot of expenses, big expenses, which most businesses are kind of expense heavy in the beginning. If you're investing in it, then all that you're not going to be able to claim back. So
One thing I'd like to add. So during COVID, a lot of the government grants were only available to businesses
GST.
who were registered for GST. So, that is something to think about too.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, anything like that would happen in the future, but from a government's perspective, they would like to support an established business, So having a GST register would potentially give you a better chance of accessing government grants and support in the future.
Be interesting to see a calculator actually, like if you're going to register for GST right from the get-go, you're probably not going to save much money by not registering for GST right from the get-go, are you? Like at the end of the day.
I mean, that's where it really comes down to the business plan, like mapping out your projections or what you see, the financial of the business being, and then going register for GST, not register for GST.
Yeah.
But you probably need an accountant to kind of help you through that.
Or maybe look at the cost of that. So let's say the first 75K, what is the most, GST you would have to pay on that amount? Probably 7K, roughly. So that is like your GST cost. But obviously you would have other expenses that you can claim GST as well. So that would be a bit lower. So, I'm more of a number person. I'll look at it, it's like, is this, 7K worth it? Or should I delay it? Or, what's, the net GST payment I would have to pay? Should I do it now, save all the, hassle of looking at it again in the future? Or, if there's no chance I will be making significant amount of money in the future, or there's too much hassle, then maybe delay it.
Yeah.
So
I think if you really don't see yourself earning over 75K ever, then it probably is a decision that you might go, well, and you're going to be having profitable sales, then it might not be the right decision. But if you see the business scaling and you see it taking off, much the same as the company structure, shouldn't I? it may be easier just to do it on day one,
Mm.
because then as you move along the business setting things up, you can make sure it's all established and correctly set up. Like if you're setting up Shopify or something, it's all set up and ready to go.
Mm.
That's right.
Not getting a letter from the ATO then going, oh no,
Mm.
what do we have to update now? We have to update our prices, our suppliers, all these kind of things.
No, absolutely. I mean, one thing, and I'm not an expert on this topic, but I've seen with some of our clients is another consideration when they're setting up sort of B2C businesses, and they're in their first year. Essentially, having GST makes it 10% more expensive for them to make a sale.
Exactly.
And I think it's the chicken and the egg. If you're dealing with corporate customers or customers that might judge you for not having GST, then that's a relevant factor. If your customers might not care and you're in year one, there can be an argument for going, okay, well, I can be a bit cheaper for a bit until such time as my business is established, and then sort of register. So I see that decision being made.
That's true.
Yeah, which is an interesting
Yeah,
one.
in saying that, in the B2B space, you don't usually quote a GST price.
No, you'll say X
Like
GST.
everything will always be assumed X GST in B2B.
Mhm.
Like if you issue us an invoice, we assume, okay, that's plus GST.
Plus
then.
GST. Yeah.
So in that case, you just get an invoice and then it wouldn't add on, which is kind of cool. Because you'd be like, oh, cool, it's cheaper.
Yes.
But plus GST, you're going to get back anyway
Exactly.
as a business if you're earning a lot of income.
Yeah.
It just, business to business, you don't really see the effects of GST. That's why they don't quote it, because it brings down their price by 10%, right?
But if you've got a side hustle, you're going to sell on eBay or Etsy,
It's
and make
different.
an extra 50 grand for the year.
Yeah.
Maybe leave it out.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true.
Cool.
So it is one of those questions for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely is. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Okay. We've set up our structure. We've decided whether we're registering for GST or not. And what are our legal considerations?
There's many of them. And sort of, as I said earlier, I think, speak to a lawyer. Depending on their personality, they'll tell you that there's a million things you have to do when you've just set up a business. I think the right way to approach it is to think about what is your business, what are the sort of key risks, and what am I going to invest my startup cash in sort of protecting against, and what might I put on the roadmap for a little bit later. That's sort of how we think about it at Sprint Law. We know that people don't have unlimited budgets to spend on legal things. One thing I'll say is sort of, particularly for businesses where brand is important, pretty much the first thing that we recommend people do is get their trademark secured. I think Alex touched on this earlier, but you've come up with your name. You've for your business name, if you're a company, sort of secured your registration. That's different to a trademark. That doesn't give you the exclusive right to use that name, or if there's a logo, that logo, or if there's a key phrase, that key phrase. That's a separate thing you need to secure through a process known as sort of registering a trademark. And in addition to registering a trademark for your the name of your organization, you can register it for your products. If there's key brand names that you sell products under, you can get additional trademarks for them as well. So what the trademark gives you is exclusive right to use a name, logo, phrase, or combination of them in a country and in a class, which is sort of like an industry. So for example, Sprint Law have a trademark for the word Sprint Law. This cool little S shape we have as our logo. We have another trademark for that. We're registered in the legal services class. And what that means is no one else in Australia in legal can use the name Sprint Law to represent their products or services, or anything sort of deceptively similar to it. So Sprint Legal, Sprint Lawyer, those things as well. Now, someone could start a cafe called Sprint Slaw that sells coleslaw or something. That's not a great name for a cafe, but potentially not infringing because, it's got nothing to do with law. So it is very much about the kind of class or industry that you register in. And the country is another component. For people with international ambitions, costs more money, but early on you can think about registering overseas. So we've registered Sprint Law. In the early days, we knew we were going to go to New Zealand, the UK. So we registered there. As we've grown, we've also secured a bunch of other countries, US and Canada. So I think that's another kind of component to think about. But definitely my view on the trademarks are you're going to spend time, money, effort investing in growing your brand. You want to make sure you own it. We've seen it's probably one of the most common mistakes we see is someone's got a name, built a website, built a brand. 6 months in, find out someone has a trademark for it already or something similar to it.
Yeah.
They got to rebrand. Sometimes they can't afford it and the business just ends. Other times there's significant costs involved in sort of fighting it. So it's definitely like number one on the to-do list, I would say, for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know we went through the re-trademarking of our brand once we changed from Thrive to Thriday. And
that just goes to show, right? Having the trademark, it kind of sets you in the right tone if you have it.
There was a couple of reasons, I guess. Like we had the trademark to our Thrive brand, but we made a decision for different reasons to move just because the marketing message was kind of similar and it was going to be really expensive to build our brand. We were at the early stages as well, where we hadn't really built the brand. And in fact, Thrive, try and get, any URL with Thrive in it or anything like that. It was actually pretty difficult. So it was an interesting move. But yeah, you want to get it right the first time, agree, for sure, because it's a lot of work and a lot of effort if you don't. Customer agreements.
Yeah. So I think some of the other things to think about, most businesses have customers, not all, but most have customers. And with customers comes liability and often your key revenue streams. So, where possible, if you can secure agreements with your customers, whether if you're an e-commerce business, that's your terms and conditions people accept when they make an order. If you're a services business, it might be a service agreement or a consulting agreement. If you supply wholesale goods, maybe you've got a sale of goods agreement. Whatever it is, we kind of look at them as a category called customer agreements. These agreements are pretty important. They do a few things. One is liability protection. If things go wrong with your orders. In addition, if you've got the company structure, you have that kind of backstop shield, but, you still may want further liability protections with each of your customers because just because you're not personally liable doesn't mean you want your company to be liable either. So, oftentimes we spend time in these agreements drafting limitation of liability clauses, which basically say if something goes wrong in the course of me providing good services or whatever, our liability will be limited to a refund or some amount of money, which means you can't sue me for $1 trillion if you just paid me, $1,000 to clean your sports car, for example. So it makes sure that the liability is commensurate to the amount being paid. There's laws around what you can and can't limit liability for in your customer agreements, and that's why it's important to kind of get lawyers involved to make sure that they actually work. But that's a really sort of key component of these customer agreements. The other is securing your revenue streams. So, if your revenue comes from these agreements, if you're a service provider and you're providing services, you're going to get paid at the end. There's a scope of work that has been kind of agreed to, and then you're going to get paid for that. What are the specifics of that scope of work? When are you going to get paid? What happens if they don't pay you on time? What rights do you have if there's issues around payment? All these things can go in a customer agreement. They can be standardized if you want. So you can have a standard agreement that can be customized, but having it all in writing, first of all, gives you the legal right to sort of get those payments. And second of all, actually just practically reduces issues and disputes in your business. So often we see issues between businesses and customers where there was just not a clear agreement as to how things worked. And maybe neither side's being particularly unreasonable, but they both had different assumptions and no agreement in place, and things fall apart and something that could have been avoided, becomes a big issue. So super important. So I think, you got your trademark done, definitely getting those customer agreements sorted is up the top of the list. I should mention some businesses, like if you're running a cafe, you're not making people sign a waiver before they drink a coffee. So it may not be practical to have customer agreements all the time. And that may just be the risk of your industry and risk of doing business. And there's other ways to prevent against it. I have, though, been to a couple of Mexican restaurants where they made me sign a waiver before I had their hottest chili. So it is done sometimes. Yeah.
So how many different kinds of customer agreements could there be? Like one for pretty much every industry?
Yeah, I mean, look, as a category, the agreements are, let's say, 50 to 60% the same because they all talk about liability protection. They often talk about payment and how they work. They talk about the same kinds of things. We have the way that we look at them, though, we have, I think, 300 different types of customer agreement that we kind of have standardized at SprintLaw. So, and there's things like gym terms and conditions, marketing service agreement, wholesale goods service agreement, e-commerce T's and C's, marketplace terms and conditions, cleaner service agreement. These agreements are like I said, 60% the same, but there are differences. There are things if you're operating a gym, there's certain risks around personal injury, use of the equipment, versus if you're a cleaner, it's something else, versus if you're a sort of e-com business. So those kind of risk protection clauses look a bit different. The payment clauses look a bit different, but
and some could be a lot more tailored. Like if you had a financial services company come along, it's not going to be an off-the-shelf thing as much as looking at what you're doing for sure.
Absolutely. And the other thing with, and that's a really good point. I think like these agreements are your sales doc as well, right? So like they're legal, but one of the issues we saw with traditional lawyers in these agreements is that they produce like 90-page terms and conditions that you're asking your customers to sign every time. For small businesses, that can be confronting. People just want a simple 1 or 2 pager. So
Apple do the same thing. Like you've never scrolled through the terms and conditions on
no, for sure.
App Store, right? And each time it's updated, it's like, check it again. You're like,
I wonder
there's no way. I'm sure someone has read through it all.
Yes, for sure. Well, I have, but that's only because I'm a lawyer.
Oh, wow.
I can't
You do that in your spare time?
I can tell you it's not fun reading, but definitely, yeah, like you're right. And I think standardization and simplification, and is this an e-signature? Is it a tick box? Is it a wedding signature? How does this work? How tailored is it? These are all decisions you want to make in your customer agreement. Yeah.
Interesting. Anything from an accounting perspective that people should consider in customer agreements and milestone payments and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's right. So so the way we see it is when you have an agreement, it could help you with cash flow as well. So we're talking about cash flow perspective, where in some industry you might want to have a payment agreement where you get progressive pay, or how would you manage the service and process throughout the length of the engagement. So yeah, I think it's important to have that agreement in place so everything's clear, the customer knows what to expect, and what to deliver.
Yeah, makes sense. And then the customer has skin in the game the whole way through the process as well.
That's right.
And then obviously if you're setting up a website, you need privacy terms and conditions, right? Well, I mean, just in general.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you're hosting a website or not. You'd obviously have it hosted there. Most people do.
Absolutely. I mean, so privacy is an interesting one. Obviously, everyone is thinking about it these days. Cybersecurity is becoming a big thing. People are getting more and more conscious about what's happening with their personal information, and laws are changing around it as well. There's been a lot of changes even in the last 12 months in Australia around how privacy law works. People will be aware probably of the GDPR, those pop-ups you see all around the internet.
So this is interesting, right? Because how many people are going to update their terms and conditions and privacy policies on their website every 12 months, right? So this is a danger in going and just copying and pasting.
In the UK, it's very different. But
right.
Yeah. Here in Australia, it's probably not that often.
Right.
Yeah.
People are not thinking about it. In the UK, because we have a sort of Sprint Law UK business, it's one of the most common inquiries we get is people being aware of privacy and knowing they need to comply. In Australia, we're the ones telling the clients, did you know there's this thing called privacy that customers care about and there's compliance obligations? And
I think it is shifting here in Australia though.
Yeah.
It's starting to shift, and it's probably brought on by the big privacy breaches of big companies
Medibank
lately.
and Optus and stuff, right?
And now that we're getting targeted more and more by hackers, it's becoming more of a thing.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, there's talk of sort of directors potentially being liable, directors of companies. So we talked earlier about, the company gives you that limited liability protection. Directors and shareholders are generally not liable. There are exceptions to that. There's a bunch of existing exceptions for cases like fraud. One that's being talked about is for breaches of people's personal information. If directors don't take steps to prevent people's information.
And that's not on the breach itself, but you would be asked, what steps did you take to protect that? How many? And if you can say, well, I've done really nothing, that doesn't look good. Yeah,
absolutely. So coming back to the policy point, so I think it's a really good idea for pretty much any business to make sure they've got a good privacy policy. If they're collecting personal information, that's a key concept in privacy law. Do you have someone's personal information? And that is defined as something that could be used to identify them. So obviously their name, their email, their phone number, their address, or some combination of other information that you could look at it and work out who they are. That stuff, if you're collecting it, this is the domain of privacy law. And in general terms, you want to be making sure that you've got consent to collect it. People know what you're going to do with it, and they know how to contact you if they want information about it. There's-
I'd also add data retention these days, right?
Mm.
Like a data retention policy. Like, what am I collecting? How long for?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Even though it's not, we don't have GDPR imposed here in Australia, you could still start mimicking that because it's probably coming anytime soon.
Mm.
That kind of framework, right?
Well, for sure. And it may be that Australia copies the GDPR or does something a little different. There's been sort of different opinions on what's going to happen in terms of how we regulate privacy. But, even in December last year, there was a bunch of updates post the Optus and Medibank breach to the Privacy Act that made us look a little bit more like the GDPR, put more obligations around how people are managing data. So in addition to the privacy policy, yes, there's also a suite of other data protection policies for internal use or external use that you might want to have. I think ultimately for any kind of organization that's collecting this information, you just want to think about this as a risk area. What are we doing? What documentation do we have? And also what processes and procedures do we have? It's all very well to have a document that says you do all these great things, but if you're leaking people's personal information left, right, and center, there's liability and risk there as well. So I think, we do a lot of work. Just the basic point is on your website, tell people that you're collecting it and what you're doing with it. In many cases, that's actually required by law. And if you don't do that, there may be a breach of law. In other cases, it's just something that's expected for good customer experience. And then beyond that, once you have it,
And
what are you doing with it?
it doesn't matter how you're collecting it either. It's still your responsibility. Like you might be using Typeform, for example. It's not on Typeform necessarily to their terms and conditions about how they're storing and handling the data. Although, of course, they need to do that.
They're a third
But
party.
they're a third party that you're using. So you're effectively got access to that data, and you need to tell people how you're going to store it and how you're going to use
But
it.
you need to have the responsibility too to work with Typeform to, delete
Exactly.
it or, ensure that your passwords are set up right. With
Yeah.
that.
Well,
It's a mix, right?
Typeform is in fact a great example because a few years ago they had a data breach, and we had customers that were using Typeform, and they thought it was all good because they were using Typeform. But Typeform, which for those that don't know, is a kind of form creation sort of software which you can use for web forms. They had an obligation in many cases to email all of their customers and say, "Hey, we use this thing called Typeform, and there was a data breach." Doesn't look good if that happens. You want to be thinking about that, who you're using. One thing we talk about a lot is a personal information register. Where is all my personal information of my customers? I mean, everyone's got it online these days. It's on my website. Is it on 7 different software as a service tools? Is it in my email inbox? Where is it? And am I kind of minimizing all the unnecessary places it needs to be or clearing it out regularly to reduce my risk? So that's one way to think about it.
I'm interested though, as a small business, like they've just started out, they've just, set up their business, they've chosen the structure. It can seem like a lot, right, to a small business. What's imposed by the government for a small business not earning a lot of income to be able to meet these, obligations that aren't really even out there yet, but are coming? How do you
think
show
about
up to that with limited investment, with limited funding?
Yeah.
No, it's an excellent question. Look, Australia right now, in fact, has a small business exception to the Privacy Act. So if you're earning, I think it's under 3 mil in revenue, and with a couple of other conditions, you don't need to comply with the Privacy Act.
So you should,
but you should
for branding reasons, PR.
You should for brand reasons, and you should if you aspire to make more than 3 mil.
Yeah.
It'll be very complicated, like with transition to a company structure, to go back and make sure you've got consents for all the previous information. So the burden is currently a lot less for sort of smaller businesses. The exceptions, of course, are if you're collecting financial information, health information, or other sorts of things. Doesn't matter if you're a very, very small organization, you need to comply. I think, though, GDPR in the UK and CCPA in the US, which are the new privacy regimes around the world, have abolished that small business exception. So
I thought it was a percentage of the taxable income on the fines that a business would pay, right? For GDPR.
In GDPR, yeah. I mean, the fines are definitely less for smaller organizations, but there's still this compliance.
And that doesn't mean to avoid it. It means,
But
you should be taking it seriously regardless.
If you think about that right from the beginning, right? Like you take let's focus on a worst case scenario. You take the simple thing, I want to set up as a sole trader. I don't want to register for GST. I don't have time to set up a privacy policy, but I'm a dietitian, so I'm collecting health information, right? And all of a sudden I'm earning 200 or 300 grand a year, and that information leaks because of a breach in whatever service I'm using. And one customer has a loss of 300 or 400 grand because of that. all of a sudden you
You're very
lose your house.
exposed.
Like,
You're
Yeah.
very,
You know?
very exposed.
so you can
Yeah,
see
you're in the red.
the
Yeah, it's
trickle.
not to say these are essential things. I'm just it's just good to understand from this small business mindset. As a new business, I'm thinking, wow, this is a lot. I have to think about this and this and this.
Yeah.
It's just how you kind of trickle it down into like what's the MVP there.
Yeah, I think it's a privacy policy, right? Like if you
Yeah.
do nothing else on privacy and you're a small business, just start with a privacy policy on your
Yeah.
site. That'll at least get you in the domain of compliance. And as you grow, like with anything else, start getting more advice on should I be doing more than the privacy policy. I think that's a good kind of pragmatic way to think about
And
this.
in 2023, it is good to think with that mindset of what's coming down the line of what data am I collecting, how am I storing it, where's it being stored, for how long, etc. Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Cool. How often should someone look at their privacy policy or think about revising it? I guess it depends on what size business they are, but
Yeah, it depends. Like generally, I think looking at your legal documents, ideally once a year is a good idea. Just because laws change. Privacy laws right now are more likely to change each year over the next few years because there's a lot of activity. So I would advise people to look at that annually. But customer agreement laws also changing. In the last between 2018 and 2021, there weren't a ton of changes, but 2022 and 2023 and 2024, each year there's been substantial changes to the laws around customer agreements. So again, if you weren't looking at it more than once a year, and for people that haven't updated it in a few years, they should now. There's new unfair contract terms laws, which mean that you've got to actually change your liability clauses. So I think as a rule of thumb, once a year to review your legal docs is not a bad idea.
And I guess what you're collecting as well changes over the life cycle of the business.
Yeah,
You might have
sure.
not been collecting much personal information. Now you certainly are, and haven't even thought about that.
yeah, 100%. Yeah.
For whatever reason.
We're an example of that. Like, you might be sending an invoice to a customer, and then you got that customer email address. But then once we launch payroll, you have all of your,
HR data.
HR
That's very
data
different.
in there. So yeah, it's definitely worth considering. Shareholder agreements.
Yeah, so maybe the kind of other area, and this is relevant to people with more than one sort of person running the business. And when we talk about shareholders, we're talking about you've got a company and there's sort of multiple owners of that company.
It's like a co-founder situation, or
absolutely like a co-founder
investor.
situation or an investor situation. Of course, in the partnership structure Alex talked about earlier, there are also maybe multiple people involved, and we'd have a similar agreement in that context called a partnership agreement.
Yep.
But the shareholder agreement is the more common one that we see when people are formalizing a more serious business. Very important document. Again, in addition to the trademarks, probably the second biggest issue that we see are fallouts between co-founders or business partners or founders and investors. This document, the shareholders agreement, is an agreement between the owners of the organization, setting out what are the rights, what are the responsibilities, what happens if someone wants to leave, what if one person wants to raise investment, the other doesn't, what if one person passes away, how do all those mechanics that can happen when you're kind of in a business marriage together, how do they play out? And if there's nothing in place, while things are good, it's all good. But if people's situations change, which again, over time, it's more likely that things will just happen and people might not be on the same page about what should happen. And it makes life a hell of a lot easier if you've got a contract that explains what happens.
That's right.
Shareholders agreements, lawyers have thought through the most common scenarios. We might not cover every scenario, but we've thought through most of the scenarios. And in the document, often we're just asking the business owners, what do you guys want to happen in this kind of situation? What do you want to happen in this situation? And then documenting that and setting up this contract. So very important agreement, I think.
It's interesting how a lot of businesses don't think about this from day one, because I mean, when you are first starting out a business, it's all very exciting. You're together with your co-founder, everything's going well. You haven't thought 2 years down the track. Most people wouldn't. They'll just be like, oh, it'll be fine. And then 2 years down the track, there's a huge fallout.
Yes.
Right.
And there's nothing in writing. And it can be a bit awkward to think about these things from day one, right?
Yeah.
To suddenly
no one
have
wants
all
to
the
think
hype,
about
the
the
hype
negative.
of the business.
Yes.
Suddenly you're, what if this happens? What if that happens? It's but
it's
it
important.
saves you down the track, I guess.
100%.
And you know that it's there in writing. It's always in the back of your mind. Well,
Yes.
You know, if things are starting to get a bit shaky, you know, well, this is the agreement we have in this circumstance, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Everything's good
It's
until
less
it's not.
awkward.
it's
Yeah,
like-
well, that's the hard part.
yeah, it's like an awkward conversation, but it ultimately can improve the relationship so much because, you know, on those days when you're a bit frustrated with the other person and et cetera, you kind of know how it all works. And
That's right.
you're going into it with this mindset of there is this kind of document that's the kind of constitution of our relationship and it just helps frame things.
I guess in some ways a prenup, but not the same, right?
Yeah.
It's not exactly the
Yeah.
same, but it's the same kind of conversation at the start. What if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
I'd go as far as to say if you can't have that conversation with a co-founder, then you shouldn't be doing it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
And
it's-
there's going to be a lot more conversations if you're getting into shareholders agreements and, you know, down the track of, you know, employee share pools and things like that.
Yeah,
Taking on investors, they're going to be a lot harder conversations with them, right?
absolutely.
Than that, for sure. And you guys did that at Friday, or?
Yeah, of course. Like we've got, you know, multiple shareholders. We did a crowdfunding campaign. We've got
Wow.
thousands of shareholders, right? Like
Yeah,
it's,
right.
we had a wild structure, right from the get go.
Interesting.
And you know, hard conversations happen in business every day. Like if you can't have a hard conversation, I wouldn't say personally, I've sort of been in bad positions like this, and these conversations will save you a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of heartache later on. So, well worth it.
Agreed.
All right, cash flow. From an accounting perspective, what do we need to talk about? What do we need to consider now that we're starting to get some revenue? We've got our structure set up. We've got our legal sorted. We've definitely got a privacy policy. We're going to generate some revenue.
That's right. So I would say cash flow is probably also one of the top tier important things for a business, right? Because you need cash flow to keep the business running. So how do you manage it well? So a couple of key principles that you got to understand when you run the business is that you have to understand your working capital. How much money do you need to have in your buying if there's no, income coming in for the next month or two, for example. And also you've got to be able to forecast how much income coming in, how much expense you're paying for the upcoming period, and also being able to meet legal obligation or ATL obligations such as tax or super,
Yeah.
things like that. So I would probably just bring these key points up as something that a new startup would have to think about. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
I mean, I just say as a founder, cash flow is super important and the thing that keeps me up at night, and something I think about a lot. And I think particularly for people starting business for the first time, being aware of how much is in the bank and when the flows of payments are coming and going in and out. And particularly if you're not familiar with things like GST and BAS and how they affect what money you have in your business bank account. Certainly for me, Sprint was my second business. For my first business, there were times when I thought our cash flow was fine and I didn't know anything about a lot of the GST and BAS payments and those sorts of things. And then, we were in situations where there were these hits I didn't expect and suddenly things were tight. So I think it's super important to make sure that you're at least high level across how it all works and having enough funding to run the business. Yeah.
That's right. If I could maybe give an example of a startup business that we worked with in the past, where the founder has attracted a lot of investment from a lot of investors. There's a lot of money coming in, but the way he managed the cash flow wasn't very efficient. So from his point of view, every month, every single dollar that came in the business should be invested in the business to grow. He did not prepare for any tax and other obligation that the business would have to pay to keep it going. For example, BAS's, BOG withholding, and income tax in the future. So we kind of provided an advice that just a general advice, that for every say $100 that are coming in, you should put $30 aside to prepare for all these ongoing. The reason is, if you get investment coming in, you spend all of that, and you can't service all these ongoing debt and everything, then essentially the business wouldn't, thrive in the future, then that would affect your chance of getting more investment from other parties. And the thing with cash flow is that if you know you only have $70 to invest, then you either got to work on getting more revenue or attracting more investor. But at the same time, you still have enough cash aside to keep it going, to get this fund coming in. So that is probably the key message that I want to send across to
100%.
Can I add just one other thing to that is accounting for GST and pay as you go, etc. On a cash flow sense, because the last thing you want to do is get to the end of the year and realize that you've been spending the GST that you need to give to the government or the collected GST. It's a huge issue in sole traders, a common issue. They get to the end of the year, they do their tax. Oh, okay, cool. Where's the 15 grand that you owe to the government? I just spent my bank account. They
Exactly.
see it as a bank account, not like the money in the bank account is the money they have.
Yeah.
Not what they have to give to the suppliers or have to give to the ATO.
Yeah.
That's where cash flow comes in. If you've set up Xero or Thrido correctly, then you've got a good vision of cash flow, right?
This is why we get out of bed every day, to make cash flow management simple for business owners. So there was a huge gap. Like in the past, it was hard to understand how much tax you owed, hard to understand how much GST you needed to pay based on your income and your expenses. And a lot of this income is going to be lumpy. Like I might earn 15 grand one month, but I might only earn 2 grand another month. And then, how do I pay for the expenses in the, month that I'm only earning 2 grand? Well, hopefully I've got some money the month I was earning the 15 grand, right? And we set it up in such a way where every time a business logs into Thrido, they see their month-on-month cash flow. Income comes in, expenses go out, tax gets calculated automatically. They can see exactly how much tax they need to pay at that point in time, or how much they're going to owe at that point in time. And there's a forecast for how much they're going to owe at the end of the tax year, because bill shock is crazy, right?
Yeah,
It's,
absolutely.
no one wants that
Especially if
feeling.
you've got a lot of suppliers and you're not keeping track of that. But the other component of cash flow is also people paying you, right? Accounts receivable.
Exactly.
And knowing that there's people that still are outstanding and owing you money, like seeing that as a thing.
Seeing that,
And you guys also chase up.
having the ability to chase those invoices, having the ability to analyze your pricing, to understand whether you're charging enough, to be able to analyze on a project level whether that project is actually profitable versus the project that is not profitable. You might have, the old 80-20 rule. 80% of your revenue might be coming from 20% of your clients, but maybe the revenue coming from those clients is much more costly than the revenue coming from your other clients. And then you need to have that hard conversation with them and renegotiate your pricing and your terms and all of that kind of good stuff. So understanding the health of your business at a glance, priceless.
100%.
What other experiences have you guys had with cash flow being founders? And, the early days, you said the early days of a business are sort of, spend heavy, where you've got to invest into the business to sort of get it up and running and get it going. Any rules of thumb or any sort of methods you applied to sort of get up and running?
I think the P&L is like what I live and breathe on, to be honest. If that thing's not up to date at any given time, then you're just not getting the right data. Like that's the source of truth, really. Your P&L, profit and loss report. To me, that's showing the health of the business. You consider cash flow, of course. But if you're not around the P&L, you don't really understand how the business is working. You could think you're making a lot of money, but you don't realize you're giving all this, expenses are through the roof or whatnot. So you really, my key takeaway would be checking that P&L once a month and going, how did we go last month? How much money did we make? How much did we spend? Where are we spending it? And what were we left with? Especially when you spend heavy at the start, because that's going to give you the projection of how much longer you got left if you're taking investment.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Like I also live and breathe the P&L, and pretty much all of the business decisions that I'm making as a founder or someone running an organization are at some fundamental level thinking about the P&L. How is this activity going to tie back to increasing revenue? How is this activity or operational project going to improve our cost side? Maybe it doesn't improve it now. Maybe it takes 6-12 months. But but it needs to at some point, because we're running an organization, and if I'm spending money, are there ways I can be more efficient to reduce those costs, or am I making sure that it's tied to some sort of outcome? And then comparing what you thought you'd spend with what you actually spent. If you wait 3-4 months to look at your P&L and you find out you've been burning cash on some, that could be business ending, right? You want to look at it regularly. I agree. Small businesses, like once a month is a very good rule of thumb to be looking at it. If you can look at it more frequently or get sub reports, particularly for larger organizations.
It can be hard because a lot of companies that bill monthly, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like your suppliers are going to be billing on a monthly basis. It's hard to get that streamlined.
For sure. And there's
unless you can accrue for it.
Yeah, agreed. And the data can be difficult to get, but you should have the intuition to want to see it more often, even if you can't.
Well, you'd be checking, if you're an e-commerce business, you'd be checking Shopify quickly to kind of see, okay, how's
my sales
going?
doing?
Or, you'd want that early feedback.
Absolutely.
Until it trickles down into the accounting system, right? So you'd have a CRM or something that would be giving those insights throughout the month.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why we built that into Thriday. Literally when you log into the home feed, there's a cash flow section and it shows you each month the profit and loss for each, like income, expenses for each month ongoing. And then we've got a more advanced section in the tax where we actually forecast your potential income and revenue and expenses for that 12-month period. And I think there's a bunch, there's 7 different algorithms in there depending on the kind of business that you are, because some are lumpy. Yes. E-commerce might make a lot of money over Christmas or whatever. The other thing that we've done, which is helping heaps of businesses, is partnering with a group called Profit First, right? And they've kind of flipped it on its head. The accounting, sort of the way accounting works, from this is how much you earn, this is how much you spend, and then this is how much tax you're going to have to pay. It's like, you earn this much, now put this percentage away for profit, now put this percentage away for owner's pay, now put this percentage away for the tax, now put this percentage away for operational expenses, which is the leftover, right? So whatever the leftover is how much money you've got for marketing, for staff, for all of these things, right? And if that operational expense account is growing in value, you can start to make really smart business decisions, right? Really easily. It just simplifies it.
That's right.
So having multiple bank accounts where you can easily distribute these funds to is another good visual thing for small businesses to consider, rather than having one bank account where all of your money's sitting, because that can look like a lot of money sometimes, and then it can look like not a lot of money. So, do you guys do that at all within your businesses? Have multiple bank accounts set up, or you just run it off the one thing?
Yeah, for other reasons, operational reasons. I try to keep it on the one.
Yeah, we have multiple, but mainly because we're in multiple countries. That's kind of the main reason. But yeah, mostly one, I think.
But I would say for smaller businesses, you definitely be just wanting to put GST aside somewhere, put it into a savings account or something.
100%. GST's got to come out,
especially if you're on a yearly cycle. You're not gonna get the bill for a year.
Yeah.
Second thing is obviously account for your income tax that you'll have to pay.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a sole trader, well, for anyone really, but if you're a sole trader, you have to pay tax on that. And if you're a company, you're going to be paying 30% on the income tax. Eventually the ATO will catch up, and what they'll do is they'll just put you onto the pay-as-you-go income tax. So you, as a company, you'll be prepaying your perceived company tax that you'll get a bill out at the end of the year. Much the same as an individual does, your company pays you, they automatically take out the tax. It's a bit different with the ATO. They'll just take it out, each cycle or each quarter. They'll just say you owe us this much. So that when you get to the end of the year, it's not like, oh, wow, I owe all this money.
Yeah.
So they've seen it. That's why they kind of put that breaker in place.
Yeah.
But those are probably the main things. Just make sure that, you're not spending all the money that's in the bank account thinking that it's there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's it actually puts businesses insolvent for that reason.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because you think you're ahead of the game. That's why it's crucial to use a platform that's giving you that insight from day one.
Yep.
The reporting information and reconciling as well, right?
Yeah. Got
Yeah,
everything up
so-
to date. Yeah.
Well, if
Because
you
the
want to,
reports are nothing without the reconciling and
No one
knowing
wants-
that it's been attributed somewhere.
yeah, the reconciliation and the claiming of the expenses, right? No
Yeah.
one wants to maximize their tax, right? They want to minimize it. So
Yeah.
the best way to do that legally is, of course, to claim as many expenses as you possibly can. So expense management is another super important thing. Are there any rules or things that we should consider from an accounting perspective when it comes to expense management?
Well, obviously, you want to look at, so as we talked about it earlier, so you should look at your monthly, P&L on a regular basis and see the trend where it's bumping, or is there any significant increase in, a particular expense or not. You want to look into it and see, does that increase contribute to my increase in revenue, or what sort of expense it is. So you want to look at every single, key accounts in there and see, does that add any value to your business, and where you can trim, any expenses that's not adding any value.
Mm.
So obviously when you reduce, your expense, you would increase your, profitability as well. So that's one way to look into it.
And definitely set up a separate bank account for the business as well. That's for the sole traders. The company you have to, you don't really have a choice. I mean, definitely don't run your company out of your personal bank account.
Yeah, no, don't do
But
that.
as a sole trader, even as a sole trader, we see it all because we just set up so many businesses. We just see all the things that they can do, and you probably see it too as an accountant in tax advice. But just you definitely don't want to be running any business out of a personal account. That the main reason is when it comes time to reconcile, it will be a nightmare.
Yeah.
When you have to go, oh, that was personal, that isn't.
Yeah.
You just have separate bank account. You can set them up for free. Bank accounts.
Takes 3 minutes.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. And have a separate credit card or debit card that you're using for the business, and that's it. Just keep it separate.
Yeah.
Makes life so much easier.
Mm.
And the ATO would cringe at that as well if you're running a
right.
business out of your personal account, because they would go, well, how do you even know what's what?
Yeah.
So that would be the main thing. Definitely don't make those mistakes.
Yeah. Keep business and personal
Separate.
banking
Yeah.
separate.
Could
Yeah.
potentially save you in terms of accounting fee as well.
Yeah.
Because,
Nightmare of
we as
reconciling
accountants
it.
have to go in and go through maybe thousands of transactions every year, trying to figure out which one is for business, which one is your personal. The more time we spend,
Mate.
the more expensive
Yeah.
it will be, for you to pay. Yeah.
We
It just-
saved a
it-
client
yeah.
$3,500 the other day. Their old method, take their shoebox full of receipts to the accountant, dump it on the desk, and then all of a sudden the accountant's paying, charging $100 an hour for data entry.
That's right, yeah.
Crazy. Right. It's just it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you want to be automating receipts, and if you're getting PDFs, automatically forwarding them on. Have it set up automated for sure.
Exactly. Automate as much as you
Because
can.
you don't want to wait to the end of the year to know all this information.
Mm-hmm.
If your shoebox is full of expenses, how do you know how the P&L's going? You don't.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not.
yeah.
At the end of the year, you go, oh wow, we're not profitable. Well, you know that because the bank account's empty, but that's if you're trying to break even.
yeah. Yeah, so
So,
bringing all of
yeah.
these products together is why we built Thriday, right? Banking, accounting, tax, expense management, all in one platform. You can literally take a photo of your receipt as you receive it, automatically reconciles to, to the expense in that bank account, and you're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, maybe there's one more thing I want to add. Talking about bank account, right? For companies, I generally advise my clients to have at least 2 bank account. One is for the trading account, and the other one is a tax saving account. So we're talking about, every quarter that you have to pay GST and PAYG installment, PAYG withholding, right? So if you put a portion of your income through to this account, you have that fund there ready to pay every quarter. So no surprise, tax, invoice from, the ATO. So you only have to worry about your trading account to use it to keep the business running. Tax is mostly well managed by the saving account. So if you can stick to that, that will help you with your cash flow and, business operation in general.
100%.
And I mean, if you're getting underway with business and things, regardless, you should be thinking from day one about, okay, what are the ongoing obligations? It hasn't been covered here as much, but obviously, reporting a BAS, lodging a BAS, lodging a tax return, understanding what are the due dates of that when it's coming.
That's right.
And
It should be across
setting
all
up the
those.
relationship with an
Yeah.
advisor, tax advisor like Pop to kind of do that, right?
That's right. Yeah. An example is, for example, for a small business may have like $100,000 in your trading bank account. If you only have that one bank account, it may look big, right? But if your quarterly, tax bill is 90K, you actually don't have much money.
Yeah.
If you have a separate bank account that's got 10K in trading, account at the moment and 90K saving, your tax is mostly safe, but you don't have much to money to keep the business going. You got to do something. You got to, get your receivable back in or manage your expense a bit better.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I would engage an advisor early on in the business, just to understand the business, right? Just to understand what are the things I should be thinking about from a tax perspective.
Yes.
Exactly.
To have that relationship set up. It doesn't mean that you need to sign up to all these crazy subscriptions or anything, but just
No. What do I need to do? What don't I need to do?
Yeah.
To make it as easy as possible.
Because you could be in a certain industry that needs a lot more tax advice than you realize, or or you could be claiming a lot more than you realize, or it's good to have the right advice.
Exactly.
That's
Like a cafe, for instance, they can't claim GST on coffee beans and all these kind of things. It's good to understand all this.
Yeah, which is exactly why we partnered with Pop to start with, right? Because people can manage their expenses and everything throughout the year, but when it comes to lodging their BAS, they can choose, the accountant assisted version and the accountant assisted version for tax, and then Pop can go in through with a fine tooth comb and start asking questions. Well, why did you do it like this? And have you considered doing it like this?
That's right.
Make those changes and make it simple.
Yeah, I would say, typically the cost you pay for your, trusted advisor, the value you would get would typically exceed the cost you pay. You'd be very saving more tax in terms of, the fee you pay to your lawyers or your accountant. So I think it's a good investment to speak to someone if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. And
You should always get guidance.
opportunity costs.
Yeah,
as
doesn't
well.
matter what it is, Yeah.
You only know what you know. And look, there's a lot to know.
Now you've got the foundation of the business set up right. I think, honestly, that's the core components of making sure you've ticked all the boxes, right?
Yeah.
You set up the company, you've chosen the name, you've got the right structure.
Got your legals
you've got
in
your
place.
legals sorted, and you have an understanding of accounting, and you've at least set up the banking and accounting system.
Yeah.
And built a relationship with an accountant.
Yeah.
And got legal advice. Now you're really building the business.
Exactly.
To a degree.
It's all about
we've got insurance there. That is probably another checkbox. Obviously, consider insurance. PIs are non-negotiable. You'd probably say professional indemnity.
Yeah.
Depending on the industry, public liability. And then
Thanks
it would come down to each industry. You probably, if you're a gym, your PL is going to be higher.
Yes, exactly. Whereas if you're
Public liability,
a lawyer or service provider, the professional indemnity is a really big one. Yeah.
or you'd have specific insurances for each business. Any insurance advisor can help you through that.
Yeah.
Or there's sites like BizCover, things like that kind of automate all of that for you.
That's right. And then you've got your trade risks and those guys for specific trade insurance, right? Which is
That's another tick box, though, you could say.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be
100%.
going without insurance. Insurance isn't much, and you'd be silly not to have it.
Yeah. And then when you get bigger, there's considerations around your business structure and insurance.
Yeah.
I know a mate of mine is even thinking about splitting his business into multiple different businesses to restructure his insurance, depending on how it all works. But I think about that.
You can do that when you're earning a lot of money, and it makes sense.
That's right.
Funding.
Let's touch on funding.
You do need to think about it.
Yeah, definitely. And it might not be from investors. It might be, an overdraft or, and there's tax implications and all that kind of stuff. Let's touch on funding.
The thing is, as a business, most banks aren't going to touch you for quite, throughout the year. Like you're not going to be able to sign up day one with a bank loan or something like that. You can't just go to the bank and get a loan. They're going to want to see business performance. I think it's like Prosper or something. They don't touch you for 6 months, depending on, the type of business.
And this is why your cash flow records and everything are so important.
You'll need all that. You can't go to the bank and go, just give me a loan. Well, how much you're making? Well, my bank account's got this much. You need the proper documents to show all of that.
Yeah.
They're going to want to see P&L. They're going to want to see cash flow, even tax statements, things like that, GST statements. But yeah, you can't really, if you're just starting out, the bank route isn't really an option. You can credit card it, but you're going to be personal liability. So it's going to, you're not going to get a credit card under the company. It's just going to be your own credit card.
Yeah.
But apart from that, then you've got the funding routes, like seeking investment and raising capital and whatnot.
For sure. I mean, I would say for very small businesses, we see people funding it out of either friends or family loans or investment, or they might have to get actually a personal loan rather than a business loan,
And then
and take the personal risk, which is very risky. Sometimes you might have to give your property as collateral for that.
is it legal per se to take a personal loan? And
You can, yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
you can. I mean, it depends on the terms of the loan and if it needs to be disclosed at the time, but
Yeah.
certainly, it's riskier because again, if you can get a loan against the business and the business assets, then if things go wrong.
that's exactly why banks won't give a business money from day one. 'Cause
Correct.
they're limited liability.
Yeah, and they're not secured, right? And even as you grow as a small business, you'll find that from the more traditional banks, it's difficult even still to get loans without, they know about the company structure and they know that the directors might not be liable, so they'll ask for director guarantees and things like that. Some of the alternative newer funders, Prosper and Muller and a bunch of others who are coming out now, are doing unsecured loans for earlier stage small businesses.
Prosper's good for a small business.
Yeah.
For sure.
But of course,
From day one.
yeah. But of course, the interest rates on those things can be pretty high, and if you're not aware of how those things work and understand particularly the interest rates and those sorts of things, then cash flow can become an even quicker problem. And that's something that not as necessarily as legal advice, we do review these agreements, but we definitely see with our clients too much debt has been taken on which can't be serviced. So I mean, loans are one route. The other route, of course, is equity funding, or these things called safe notes or convertible notes. Probably more used by startup companies that are looking to grow very big. And what you're doing with those forms of funding, rather than like a loan where you take money and pay it back with an interest rate, you're actually really selling a portion of your company. So you're going to have an investor who actually owns a piece of it. You don't have to pay them back with interest necessarily. They're hoping, though, that the company will, in the medium term, long term, depending on what you're sort of saying, going to be generating dividends for them in the way of profits in the organization that will get issued to them as shareholders, or it might sell in the future and, they own 1% and the value of the business goes up 100 times and they make 100 times on their 1%, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The path of going down that kind of funding is very different. It involves people actually buying a bit of the business. They want to know, what's your strategy? How is this thing going to generate me returns? And there's funds out there, private equity, venture capital firms, or angel investors that you can go to for that sort of stuff. So certainly for many organizations, it's difficult to get these loans at the beginning unless you're willing to take personal risk. So it's kind of the only option is to do that. But once you've been around a little while, built up a bit of history, and have some cash flows coming in, then the sort of loan route becomes a bit easier to access.
Crowdfunding is another one.
Yeah,
we had great experience with crowdfunding early on, and you've got companies like Birchall who go and organize, all of that for you, and you literally end up with, tens, hundreds, maybe thousands of investors, depending on what your pitch is like, really.
Yeah. Definitely a new thing we're seeing in the last 2 years. Lots more of the kind of equity crowdfunding thing happening, and you end up with a lot of shareholders. But Birchall, I think, is one of the main platforms that's doing it now, and there's a couple of others as well. Have made the process really easy, right? So
and it's it's not. You don't have to be a tech business or anything like that. There's people doing hot chili sauce and stuff like that. Crowdfunding. I invested in ZeroCo, which is sustainable packaged housing products, etc. So there's all kinds of things.
Maybe there's one thing I would add to this is, the structure you choose to operate your business would either help or hinder your, ability to access funding as well.
100%.
Yeah, I think we did touch on that at the start when we were talking about company, and we kind of mentioned that an investor's not going to touch the sole trader structure.
Yeah.
That's right.
Or any other kind of. It's going to be a company.
Usually,
Birchall wouldn't deal with sole trader.
No.
Trust,
But if you go and talk to them, they'll help you out with
in the restructure,
the structure that you need to set up and all that kind of stuff.
Those are if you're serious about getting funding in that, you're probably going to want a company structure.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's just not.
And I reckon the other structure probably can just allow you to get debt funding, which is loan borrow from the fund, but wouldn't get any investor if it's not a company.
I agree.
Sure.
Yeah. We kind of touched on branding when we were speaking about, choosing a name and whatnot, and we spoke about trademarks, and
Yeah.
you agree?
Yeah. A lot of people start with a brand and go out and buy their domain name and, build their website and all of that kind of good stuff, and then struggle to even sell anything.
But that's the exciting stuff. I mean,
That's
the stuff
exciting.
I love.
Yeah,
We spoke about. I
that's
love starting the business. It's good and all that, but this is the fun stuff.
This is the fun stuff. This
choose
is
the
the fun
brand
stuff.
and setting up the website and setting up an email and actual operations of the business and
Yeah.
getting it off the ground, setting up Shopify.
Yeah.
Or, whatever the cool
Yeah.
tools are that you're going to use to run your platform, your business.
Yeah. Exactly.
To me, that's the fun part.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to say to people starting a business, like, there's a lot of admin at the beginning or it can seem like there's a lot of admin. Obviously, all of us are trying to make it simpler. But if you go out and just make your first sale, all this admin seems much more exciting because you're like, I got money coming in. Now I need to set everything up.
100%.
So
even that little cha-ching you hear on that Shopify app.
Exactly.
Amazing.
That's right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. It's super cool.
I mean, we were bootstrapped off. I put literally $3,000 into the business and bootstrapped the whole business off that back in 2013.
Yeah.
I didn't have that much legals back then and nothing. And, we're here thriving today.
Yeah.
It's not to recommend people to choose that route. It's always good to be risk averse.
100%.
But I'm just putting it out there that, the most exciting thing for me was getting an email making our first sale. And that was driven by our amazing sales agent, Google Ads. And I didn't hire anyone or anything. It just literally turn on the ads and traffic comes through.
Yeah.
Hard to break even in the beginning, but to me, that's the fun stuff, building the business and getting it off the ground and getting your first sale and, speaking to customers.
Yeah.
Getting out there into the world.
Exactly. We had a website and a wait list set up before we had a business, right? Just to see if the idea was valid. And even way back in the day, I started selling on eBay and made enough money to get out of the army, right? Because I replaced my military wage just by selling on eBay.
Wow.
I didn't have a business name. I didn't have, GST. I didn't have anything set up, right? It was just a side hustle that turned into something good at the time.
Exactly.
So, you might want to start here.
I agree. Testing an MVP. I mean, we took a similar route. I just put up a basic WordPress landing page that said register your company today. When you click register, it showed a credit card form that, nothing happened. No payment came out. The minute they click continue, it just said an error has occurred. We'll get back to you shortly. What was I trying to do there? Just test how much it costs to acquire a customer from Google and what the conversion rate is there.
Yeah.
Basic funds that I could put that into a business plan and go, wow, there is money to be made here.
Yeah, exactly.
These are the kind of hacky things.
Yeah.
Even if it sounds silly, like, a customer gets an error, these are things you need to think about.
100%. We started off
and required $10 for a WordPress landing page to test it out.
Yeah.
As you say, a wait list just to show demand.
Yeah, we started with the wait list. People joined the wait list. We added a skip the queue, pay $5 to skip the queue. There's your
intent
proof,
for money.
right? That people are actually going to want to pay for this product.
And with all the tools like Facebook ads and Google ads and everything, you can get instant feedback for literally little to no money.
Easy.
You'd agree?
100%.
Absolutely. I mean, so much of what we did, and again, coming back, we're called Sprint Law, and the idea was do stuff fast, get feedback, and then change your business model. We were bootstrapped for the first 2 years of the business, and very much, we're lawyers, so we probably did a bit more admin than the average, but very much we were just quickly getting the site set up, getting the landing page up, seeing what our customers actually wanted. And within the first 9 months, our business model changed significantly based on the feedback we got from customers. We thought we were going to be, in the very early days, a complete self-service solution. We thought we were going to have a whole bunch of forms that people could just generate any kind of legal doc. But, when we actually launched that, people were answering these forms with like 50 questions and falling asleep. And we realized this is not the model people want. We need some kind of lawyer assisted element, and that kind of informed the business model and ultimately so much else. So I think it's super important. And I do think, cash flow is a thing to worry about. But in the beginning, the exciting part, if you're bootstrapping or building the MVP, the tightness of the cash can give you some of that excitement and motivation to make this thing work. We were at a point, we started in early 2017, and I didn't save too much when I left my corporate job to start the business. but I bought one Bitcoin in 2012 and ended up just selling that, got 20 grand. And that was the kind of startup capital for Sprintlr.
Yeah.
And then we just had to make it work with 20 and managed to get some positive cash flows within
Exactly.
6 months.
You know, I think some people overthink that the early days, like, oh, I've got to get investment, I've got to get this,
Yeah.
otherwise it won't happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe Bootstrap has disappeared lately, but
Mm.
not that it's disappeared as in people aren't doing it. I just think investment's so hyped up.
Yeah.
I still own 100% of the company, and once again, yeah, I own 100% of the company. Maybe it could be a bigger company with investment, but I don't have anyone to answer to. I answer to
Mm.
myself.
And you
And
know
I
what?
love that,
This
you know,
is an
so-
interesting point. A bunch of research we did because we try and market and attract small businesses. 70% of business owners don't want to grow at all costs. They
Mm.
just want to make enough money to make the kind of living that they want, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And then you've got the the passionate professionals, right? And they just want to do what they love,
Mm.
right? They don't even really care about the money side of it. If they're making enough money, great, but the passion. And then you've got the ones that want to grow at all costs, right?
Well,
Which is
you-
about 10 or 15%.
You don't always have to think about the exit from day one.
No.
I mean, you could just
No.
think about doing what you love
Mm.
and just building a lifestyle out of the business. It's
Exactly.
fun. You don't, your hair doesn't go grey quicker, you know?
Yes. And although we've got
It's not, there's different routes for every business. I mean, you guys took investment. It's not saying it's better or worse. Just
No.
think about what you want to achieve.
exactly.
It doesn't have to be investment to get the business off the ground. You can bootstrap certain industries, especially like an e-commerce site or something, right? Or just that's just an example, but just giving them,
So we've
something.
got all of these points here, and there's a
Yeah.
lot to think about, right? But at the end of the day, right here and now, it's never been easier
Yeah.
to start a business and to set all of this up. Like I
Exactly.
said, you can jump on eBay, sell a piece of clothing that you didn't wear anymore, get that first sale, get pumped about it, and then go, cool, I'm gonna run away and do this.
Mm.
Yeah.
So yeah, easier than ever before. You can set up a website in 2 minutes. You can set up a company, and how long does it take to get a company?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. How long does it take to get a privacy policy?
If you work with us, 3-4 days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Takes 3 minutes to get a bank account with Thriday, and then you've got your full cash flow management system.
Yeah.
You know what? Takes 2 minutes to lodge a BAS, and then it's right in front of Pop.
So in under a week, your business is up and running.
You're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
So
in,
it's never been easier.
in most cases, you've got the basic framework set up and running.
Mm.
Yeah.
and then super important, customer support. So I know we're massive on customer support and voice of the customer, listening to our customers. We have a feedback program called Refiner, right? And every time someone does something important, like sends an invoice, receives a payment, claims an expense, we'll pop up a little survey that says how easy was it to do that particular thing, and they'll give a score out of between 1 and 5, 5 being good, 1 being bad. And then the question after that, where the real gold is, we say, why did you give that? Why did you choose that option? And what that enables us to do in the business is not only can we track on aggregate how well we're performing out of 5 across the whole product, but we can go and look at, all right, invoicing's got a 4.5. Expense management has a 4.8. Let's focus on invoicing and fix that part of the product or make that part of the product better with a goal of getting that customer effort score to 5. And I can't talk enough about how important customer service is, listening to the customer and changing the way you do business, changing the way you serve your customers based on their feedback in as real time as possible. You need to do that. And I learned this back in the day when selling on eBay. They had feedback, right? Like if you didn't ship that item quickly and the person didn't receive it, you get bad feedback.
Right.
And then everyone can see that.
I agree with that. I think it's good to really get feedback from the customers and live and breathe that. I mean, if you were to ask, how do we build the business? How do we choose the products that are in our business? It's really listening to what the customer keeps asking for, and that we've been saying, no, we don't deal with that. From day one, company registration is all we offered. And then people start asking, can you do an ABN as well? And then we just add that on. Now we have over 15 products that we offer. It's all just been working with the customer, listening to what they want. That really dictates the need. If you're kind of charging ahead and you're going, this is what people want, and you think you know it, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to work.
Yeah.
It might, because you might be Steve Jobs bring out the iPhone or something. We need that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But sometimes you just are reinventing the wheel, just doing it better,
Mhm.
just doing it a different way,
Yeah.
doing it in a more customer centric way, potentially.
Really agree with that. I mean, we had a really one metric or one target in the first couple of years of the business was we never want less than a 5-star Google review, and we want a really high NPS. And that was like the only goal. We didn't even actually think about sales targets and other targets. We introduced them later because we needed them, but it was just like, we want everyone to have an amazing experience. And that was good to help build the brand, but it had all these kind of unintended flow-on effects, which is what you're alluding to. It actually meant, well, we're optimizing for amazing customer experience. So, hey, we actually need to change the product. We need to change the service. We need to change the way we write emails until we make sure that everybody's mind is blown when they work with us. And I think I wouldn't necessarily suggest everyone just have one goal like that, but I do think it's a good mindset of going, ultimately, a business is going to rest on customers choosing you, advocating you, coming back to you, depending on your business model.
Yeah.
And that's, again, going back to the P&L, all that's going to eventually lead back to the P&L. But does your actual offering achieve the goal, achieve the mission of making customers happy? And so I think that mindset is really just like a good one to have.
They're gonna tell you what's wrong or right in your business, and you've got to listen to that.
Yeah.
You don't have to implement everything that's wrong, especially when you're starting out a business. There are going to be a lot of things that take time to catch up on.
Yeah.
And to implement, you might feel like you're behind because customers are demanding this. You can't do everything from day one.
Yeah.
But eventually you'll get there and you'll be able to service that, right?
Exactly.
I'm sure it was the same kind of story with Friday taking off. You didn't do payroll, you didn't do this, you didn't do that.
Yeah. We could build a team of 1,000 people to try and service every request that we get for a feature or a product or whatever, but you've got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Stick to the core.
Stick
and
to
then
the core.
And then the core kind of grows, but you don't want to.
100%. Yeah, the core grows. You've got to always progress. You've got to always be getting better. And sometimes that means adding additional features, making features better. Sometimes it means removing things, taking things away because, you've created friction or not enough people are using it. So, it's taking away the time that you could be investing in the things that people are using. And I imagine in a business like Pop, you guys can improve dramatically because of the network effect of all of the clients that you have and the various questions that they're asking. And, just your service overall could evolve really rapidly with what and the feedback that you guys get.
That's right. So we do listen to our customers' feedback. So based on, the feedback that we get, we can formulate our team better and look at the range of services that we provide. There are things that you would believe when you first started that these are the things that people would need from an accounting and tax perspective, but it might not be true. When you hear feedback from people, you started knowing, these are actually the key things that people would like to look at. And how do we manage our team? How do we manage our processes to help and maximize the benefit that we could give to our client, and at the same time, making, a nice profit too. So, it's very important to get that because it helps. I think from a financial point of view, it could help you increase your revenue. And from a HR point of view, it could make the team better. Because we, as professionals, probably like you as well, the biggest expense is also our biggest asset, employees.
Yes.
How do we manage our employee workload is very important. So that comes down to the feedback and what they need to do to service the need of our clients. If they do enough, they're happy with that, that will help us grow.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
100%.
Agreed, for sure.
100%. And you touched on employees being the biggest asset. Let's talk about that quickly. Obviously employee contracts, imperative to success.
I think, if you're hiring staff, which, if you're at that point, well done.
It's one of the hardest points.
Yeah, exactly. It's a milestone, and things change when it goes from just, you or a couple of founders starting a new business to employing people.
Yeah.
You obviously there's financial things you want to think about from a legal perspective. You want to have an agreement in place with your employees, and you want to make sure you're complying with workplace laws. It's not rocket science. The Fair Work website in Australia has really good information for small businesses that are going to be employing people.
Yeah.
There's reasonably good regulations in Australia for smaller organizations to make it easy to comply and take staff on. Essentially, you've got sort of national minimum wages and minimum conditions that pretty much every employer in Australia has to comply with, and then industry specific, what they call awards.
Well, this is the rocket science part, right?
Yeah, that's where things get a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
And where, you got to be working out what are the pay rates for the different industries and how is there overtime requirements and certain things depending on what industry you're in.
Yeah.
And where we often get involved is with the agreements. You should, it's not necessarily a legal requirement, but pretty much every business should have an employment contract with their staff, setting out things like, what's this person's job? If they're going to leave, what's the notice periods? How does that work?
Yep.
Is there a probation period? When and how does pay work? If they're creating IP, intellectual property for your business, who owns it? If you don't put anything in writing, the employee actually owns it by default. So this is why contracts essential, just to make sure they do something for your business, it's yours. If they're a key hire, do you want to put any restraints on them, leaving and working for a competitor straight away? These kinds of considerations, what notices do they need to give you for holidays and how does the Christmas period work is a big thing for a lot of organizations. So just having a contract that covers these items is important. And there's usually two types of contract that we broadly do. There's other ones for more complex executive roles and so on. But for most small businesses, if you've got casual staff, there's a casual employment agreement. You'll have a template you just use for everyone. And then you'll have a full-time/part-time template, pretty similar for permanent full-time and part-time staff. And if you have those two documents, that will get you most of the way there. If you have things like commission and bonus arrangements and so on, there's more complexity. But for most people, it's just those two.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And I mean, hiring people isn't the easiest thing. You're going to make mistakes. Especially from day one, getting out there, getting employees into the business. Your first hire is probably not going to be the best, but you'll only realize that after. But I think that, one of the mentalities, hire slow, fire fast or whatnot. You can adopt whatever, works best. But I think it is good to really move through and make decisions quickly in that.
Yeah.
I think, as a founder in the early days, I think I definitely held on to people a lot longer than I should have. Just, for whatever reasons, but it is good.
You kind of feel like you need to. And even in this market where it's hard to find people as well, like you can get caught up in that.
You can, and you can feel a little bit guilty as a founder, like bringing someone on. And then the hardest thing is like, oh man, they're not the right fit. And those are only things that you learn as you go along. It's going to happen, but sometimes you just have to take the leap and kind of make that action. And eventually the business grows and grows and you learn the values and the culture and it, becomes apparent. But the second biggest thing is managing people as well. It's not an easy thing. Some people are better at it than others. All founders are going to have a different skill set for sure. And be better at it. But people speak to most founders, and people is like one of the biggest challenges in the business, but it's also where most of the stuff happens and things get done.
Yeah, you want to get it right. That's for sure.
People create the product and create an amazing business. So HR is crucial.
Yeah, look after your people, give them the training that they need, the tools that they need to do the job,
and listen as well. Listen. Yeah. It's not a dictatorship.
No.
Yeah.
It's definitely not. So, we touched on payroll, but at the end of the day, you probably don't want to be using an Excel spreadsheet to manage payroll.
No.
Payroll is a beast with various awards and all of that kind of stuff. So, you want to get help where that's concerned and make that easy.
And that's an obligation as well. Like reporting on payroll and
correct
having the right system.
There's a lot of stuff in the news at the moment, right? Of
STP and all that kind of there's legal requirements around payroll and making sure that it's handled correctly.
Yeah,
it's not just you just pay someone money and that's it. You want to have a system that tracks it all.
Yeah, and you do not want to be one of these.
And depending on the industry, you got to have time. You want to have timesheets and things like that.
Yeah.
If it's mostly full timers, you don't need that. But if you're a casual heavy business, then Deputy or something.
Deputy, there's great tools out there, 100%. Really streamline things.
And just streamlining payroll tax as well. Yeah. Those things can be so automated, they shouldn't even be an issue. really.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm saying they can be that automated that they're not an issue.
Yeah.
Not that they always are, but
Yeah.
those are just parts of the business that should just be done. Like,
Right.
it's not. If it's done right and it's set up right, it shouldn't be a hassle.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's set up wrong, it's a hassle.
Then it becomes a hassle for sure.
Yeah. So
a
you want to
big-
have the right system in place.
Definitely. Inventory management's another big one, especially from an accounting perspective. You know, I know how hard it was back in the day managing inventory that we had in stock and that we'd sold, and you know, the spare parts that we were using, and even just having a record of it to know how much you could sell, let alone taking into account at the end of the financial year how much value you had in stock on hand.
That's
and all
right.
that kind of thing. So there's all these considerations.
That's right. So I think inventory management is very important because it affects your cash flow and your profitability as well. So it is important to work out a break-even point where you know how much inventory you should be holding, because you don't want all your cash to be, you know, tied up in inventory where you could use that cash for, you know, something else in the business, right? It's a common mistake, or something that people don't usually do often is knowing and keeping track of their inventory. You'd be surprised like how often I ask my clients that, you know, do you know what stock level you have at the moment? And I think 80% of the time, no one knows, especially for smaller businesses who don't have a good system of tracking it. But the key is you should know, so you know whether what you have in the book is actually reflected in your warehouse or something. Is there any issue with stock? Because there could be items where it could be expired or outdated that you may need replacement. That will affect your profit. Or is there any issue with theft?
Yeah.
You know, so those are the things that you should know on a regular basis, so you can make informed decision to help your business grow in the future.
Yeah, sometimes it'd be cheaper to give a replacement than a refund, right? Even
That's
things
right.
like that.
Mm.
And if you don't have enough stock on hand to do that, then you're out of luck. Marketing and sales. I could talk all day about this stuff. It's kind of my bread and butter, but at the end of the day, if people don't know you exist, then it's going to be very hard to sell your product. And awareness is imperative, but then you've got to have something interesting, a reason for them to want to interact with you. And that's effectively, you know, your landing pages, your ads, all of that kind of good stuff. And then you're going to have to want to create some sort of desire for them to want to work with you. You've got to be contactable. You're going to want to have, you know, your phone number, your email address, chat, whatever set up. And then you've got to have a way for them to take action, buy your product. And then all of these things need to be coherent and set up in a way that makes a lot of sense for marketing and sales to work effectively. So it comes back up to your brand and your website.
Yeah, I mean,
and all that
your
stuff.
website's your shop front.
Yeah.
In many cases, not all businesses have that applied to them, but yeah, you know, if you walk into a messy shop, do you really want to check out and you know, buy something from that person? I think in today's world, we think, oh, the website is just a website. All websites are websites, right? They're all the same, but they're not. Like, you want to kind of have it done. It's your opportunity to brand. And if there's any issues or technicalities on the website preventing people from checking out, it's a bad experience. But it's also just got to be functional and work well and flow well. You know, in the beginning, maybe you don't have the budget to put into like a full branded website design, and it's just going to be using something like Wix or, you know, getting it off the ground. But eventually, you're going to want to put the money into a really well-designed site that flows well.
Exactly.
That's functional, and that's your brand. So that's your opportunity for branding.
And your positioning, right? Like people need to understand what it is you do and what it is you sell quickly, easily, upfront. You know, don't try and be too clever.
Yeah.
And
I guess it then gets into industry specific and marketing. Like every business is different. You know, you could be in B2B where it's outbound sales and you're making a lot of calls and using LinkedIn data, or you're getting into like, I guess, the territory that we're in, where we can capitalize on Google's ability, which I mentioned before. So I won't go into that too much. But look, if you're a business where people are typing things online and looking for you and you're not there, that's a problem. You want to be found.
Yeah.
And organic SEO, it's not easy to just get into from day one. If you're just getting a business off the ground, that's a 6 to 9 month journey minimum, depending on the scope that you're in or the industry that you're in. So then you want to look at search engine marketing, like paying Google or Bing. But we also live in this amazing world where we have Instagram and Facebook, where it's just so cheap. It is hard to drive conversions from those platforms depending on the business you're in. But you have those tools out there now. Is it done right most of the time? Probably not, but it's at least better to do something
100%.
rather than nothing. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and it's working for you. So
Yeah.
Customer acquisition, you know, is a challenge for all businesses, but it can be done so well, and you know, it can get your business off the ground. I think
100%.
if you just set up a website and you're waiting for people to show up, it's not going to happen. You've got to
build it and they'll come.
and Facebook
happen.
organic strategy and Instagram. I mean, Instagram organic is still kind of working these days. By organic, I mean you're not paying, you're just putting up posts. It kind of works. Maybe if you have an influencer background or something. But yeah, I guess you got to look at the quickest way is just look at what competitors are doing. Successful competitors in that space. Where are they? What are they doing? What's working for them?
It's super industry specific as well.
It is. That's why you don't want to go too much into it.
Yeah.
But most small businesses, I would say, have the capacity to market their products online somehow. It just depends where and what that's
exactly.
happening.
Exactly.
But in today's world, I think if you're not online, you're not found. I would just hope that you'd take a business, you'd put it into Google, and you'd hopefully be the first result for that brand keyword at least eventually.
Correct.
You want to be found, right?
Exactly.
It shows reputation and having a profile and whatnot set up in Google.
Yeah, for sure. I think for a lot of like small businesses, there's a threshold I think you need to do online. So, for some businesses, you may make your entire marketing sales strategy totally online driven, where you're, targeting search, you're targeting social. But for pretty much any business, there's a threshold level where your website represents your brand. Chances are, no matter what you do, someone's going to type it in Google and they want to see a professional looking site that represents a type of brand. And, this is legit. This looks good.
Yeah.
So you want to just make sure as a threshold, you have that sorted. Then I think a question for the marketing sales stuff is like, where are my customers and how do they find out about what I'm doing? For us, we knew that there's kind of two common places, at least the low-hanging fruit was people find out about lawyers traditionally just through referrals from people. And that's true for a lot of very small businesses when you're just getting started. Just get a few customers from people that you know, and then they tell their friends, and that can be your first attempt at marketing and sales. But we knew that there's like something like 250,000 search terms around specific legal things. So we're like, that's our playground. Let's show up when people search for that. Let's write blog content. Let's spend our time on Google. And now increasingly Bing, which is growing a bit. But I have a client that runs like an ice cream business. There's not 200,000 search terms for ice cream, and there's a few. There's only so many, so they can't write that much content, and search may not be the place where they acquire customers. Maybe they do social. Maybe they just rely on referrals and their product organically growing over time. But even they still need an amazing website and a good brand. It still matters, just might fulfill a different purpose.
It is it's the first shop front the customer sees for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the way to communicate your brand.
Yeah.
In today's world, it's a given. Even if you're not a pure online business, you'd still want a business card there or something, right?
Yeah,
100%.
100%. And a profile set up.
So cheap, so easy. It's an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah. It's not the easiest setting. Well, yeah, it is point and click mostly, but websites are still technical things. And
yeah, it's pretty easy.
But point and click, Wix or something, you can be done in 20 minutes and have something better than nothing.
Yeah, 100%. BAS and tax. We kind of touched on this earlier, right? If you're registered for GST, you're going to need to submit your BAS, and like it or not, you're going to have to submit your tax.
That's right. So I think, key points for business owners to know is to know the due date that your BAS is due, have cash aside, and, be prepared for it. Know the exact date, have, your fund ready, and talk to your advisors, or also utilizing software like Thriday, where you can sort of foresee, how much tax you have to pay when it is due.
Yeah.
So that helps a lot with planning.
Yeah. Don't leave it till the last minute.
No.
Don't give your accountant a shoebox full of receipts because you're going to be paying through the nose for data entry.
Yeah,
Just stay organized.
that's right.
Exit legal.
Yeah, I mean, probably a whole topic in and of itself, which, but just to give a bit of a sense, I think it's just worth knowing when you're setting up, running your business, at least having an understanding of how can this thing end, and there can be happy endings or unhappy endings. I think some common ways that the business can end are on the more negative side. It doesn't work out, or you just don't want to do it anymore. And a couple of ways, if it's a very small business with not much liability or assets, you can actually just deregister the company, and there's a simple process to do that and sort of move on. For many businesses who have let's say outstanding creditors or other stakeholders, you would go through a sort of insolvency process, and there are service providers that can help out with that. So if things don't work out, you're looking at in simple cases deregistering, or in more complex cases the kind of insolvency process. On the more positive side, there are different ways where you actually get some money back instead of not getting any money back. And a common is to sell the business. For a lot of small businesses, there are sort of websites and brokers that will help you sell your business, and there's a process that you go through where, depending on your organization, you'll either sell the assets of your business. So you'll have a company usually at the point that you're selling, although you may be a sole trader business. But it's not the case that you would necessarily sell ownership of your company, your Pty Ltd entity, to someone else. You can do that. But for small businesses, more commonly, you'll come up with a list of assets, which will include all of your inventory, all the things you own, and an item called My Brand and Goodwill and My Trademarks. And you'll have a package of items, and you'll sell that to someone for X dollars. Hopefully lots of dollars. And that's often how a business will be sold. For sort of the startup companies that reach bigger scales, different things happen at larger scales, where you do actually have these sale of the entities, share acquisitions. In some cases, if they get really big, they might IPO and sell to the public on the stock exchange, or become a subsidiary of a large entity. So and that whole field is kind of called M&A, mergers and acquisitions, which is the bigger business version of the small business sale. So in those cases, people will be owners of the company. There'll be proceeds of sale, whether it's the M&A or the small business sale. Hopefully they're making more money than they put in, or money that they're happy with, and that can be a way for the sort of story to end. So as I think Alex said earlier, you don't necessarily need to be thinking about from day one, what is my exit? Because if you're a human being, you will probably change over time in terms of what you want to do. But it's useful to have in mind where this story could end. What am I trying to achieve here? Do I want to sell this thing in a few years? And am I building it in a way that's sellable? Do I want to generate profits from the business and just do this because I love what I do and do this for the rest of my life? What is it that you're working towards? And that might influence your business strategy and so on. But those are some ways I think that the story can end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Guys, we've reached the end. Thank you so much. It's been awesome.
Great
Alex, Easy Companies, Alex from Sprint Law, Lee from Pop, and me from Thriday.
Awesome.
Thanks
Nice
for
one,
the-
guys.
Thanks.
Yeah, nice. Awesome.